Right. Hi, I am Jasmine Kyles. I am a manager of product management here at AWS, and I am joined today by Tenable, and I have Arick with me. Arick, how are you today?
Good. Hi, Jasmine. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
Awesome. We're so glad to have you here. We're going to talk about Tenable Cloud Security today. Tell us, what's your title? What's your role at Tenable?
Sure. So I'm Vice President for Product Cloud Security, and my role is to um, build the vision and execute on the product roadmap of Tenable Cloud Security. So, kind of my team and I are building the vision and prioritizing the features, engaging customers, understanding their needs, and making sure that these are correctly prioritized into our roadmap and our product.
Awesome. And so tell us a little bit about where Tenable serves in the market.
Sure, absolutely. So Tenable is basically an exposure management company. We at Tenable help over 43,000 customers globally around the world get visibility, understand, manage, and reduce their overall cybersecurity risk, right? So understanding what their exposure is to the internet, what the internal exposures look like, and how they can minimize those exposures, driving their security and compliance.
Got it. And so you're wearing a fun shirt today. Tell us about it. What's Hermetic?
Sure. So Hermetic is basically, we were a cloud security company. I was one of the founders at Hermetic, and we recently partnered with Tenable and became part of Tenable. And basically, a Tenable Cloud Security solution is powered by the product we have built in Hermetic over the last 4 years. It's a very recent and very exciting partnership that we embarked on. So the deal closed early October, and we are one since early October, helping all these 43,000 customers securing their public cloud infrastructure, understanding their exposure around public cloud infrastructure, understanding risks, helping them prioritize risks and threats in their public cloud environments, and drive, as I said earlier, security and compliance, specifically within the public cloud infrastructure environment, securing platforms like AWS and others.
Got it. So giving users this visibility into their public cloud and figuring out, how do they keep it secure?
Correct, correct. And when you look at the at public cloud infrastructure, in many ways it is very similar to traditional on-premise. So you have your networking layer, right? You have your data stores layer, so storage databases. You have the compute layer, and then you have the identity layer, right? And we really help customers cut through that complexity, go across that stack, understand where the biggest problems are and how these layers across the stack are interconnected, helping them prioritize real risks, focus on what matters most in their environment, and help them drive remediation efforts through modern integration into modern DevSecOps processes and DevOps processes in the organization.
Yeah. So I really heard you say, a lot of things. We talk about identity, you're talking about helping people prioritize and then also get to remediation, all while everything is still running in the DevOps environment.
Yeah, that's true. When we founded Hermetic, and I think that was one of the things that caught the eyes of Tenable and got them excited and created this partnership, is our unique approach to cloud infrastructure security. If you look at a lot of vendors in the space and emerging cloud native application protection vendors, CNAPP vendors, what traditionally was called CSPM, cloud security posture management, their approach to cloud security was to take technologies that were relevant for on-premise and basically extend those technologies into the cloud. So if traditionally people used to secure their workloads by deploying agent-based technology or agentless technology to secure workloads, the first generation of cloud security vendors extended that technology to the cloud. What we've tried to do is take a cloud native approach to cloud security. We understand that vendors like AWS offer a lot of platform as a service
Mhm.
services, right? So if you're using a managed database, there is no way you can secure the compute resource that this database is running on because you as a customer, you don't own the compute resource. That's a shared responsibility model, and the compute resource is owned by the cloud service provider, by AWS. So you have to take a different approach. So we started thinking about, okay, if not the compute, where the major control plane in the cloud is. And we quickly understood that it's the identity layer, right? Basically, everything in the cloud is managed by identities, and identities need to have the right entitlements to access resources, manage resources. You could have human identities like, DevOps people, security teams, developers that actually access the infrastructure and,
Mhm.
deploy or configure the infrastructure. You have service identities. Sometimes the infrastructure can be deployed through a DevOps cycle, CI/CD, right? So you have the Jenkins roles or the Azure DevOps roles or, CloudFormation roles that actually go and create the infrastructure. Or you might have machine identities. So you've rolled an application in your environment, you have a workload, and that workload needs to access a storage like an S3 bucket. And to do that, it needs a machine identity with entitlements. So entitlements, they basically are all over your cloud infrastructure. And um, basically, that's a major control plane and is also the biggest attack surface. So we quickly understood that without the right visibility and the right ability to manage entitlements in your cloud infrastructure, there is basically no way you can secure a modern AWS environment. And that's where we started. And through that, we created a new category in the cloud security space called CIEM, or Cloud Infrastructure Entitlement Management, which became a core of our broader CNAP platform. So yes, today here at Tenable, we look across the stack. We're not looking only at identities. We're looking at identities. We're looking at network configurations, workload protection, everything. But we understand that identity is a core element of that cloud infrastructure security strategy that we offer our customers.
Yeah. That covers a wide range of things, but what I want to go back to is you talk about, all of these different DevOps environments going on and the teams having a lot over their plate. They could sometimes over permission, right? The identities here. And so how does Tenable really help them to kind of have a good view of that and what that could look like and how to make sure that they are staying on top of it?
Sure, absolutely. So first and foremost, like everything in security, you have to start with visibility and governance, right? So you have to understand all your identity structure across your cloud infrastructure. And you have to bring that context that I was talking about earlier to the story. So you have to understand which identities are human identities, right? And where they are managed. They might not be managed within the cloud infrastructure, but rather in an identity governance tool, an IDP like Okta or something else, one login and others, right? There might be federating from on-premise into your cloud infrastructure, right? So you have to trace those identities back from your cloud infrastructure into the identity provider that you're using. That's for the human identity. Then you have the service identities we talked about. You have to understand who's using those, whether these are applications, your applications, maybe third-party applications that are utilizing those service identities. And when you talk about those applications, you have to understand their broader context. So, for example, you might have an application that is running on the server, and that server is exposed to the internet, right? So
Mhm.
obviously, that server and the identity that is being used by that application are at a high risk because of the exposure story. So that broader context is very important, even when you're looking at the identity side of things, right? So visibility and context. And then once you have the context, you can start prioritizing risk based on that breach context, right? So if you have a third party accessing your environment and that third party has the ability to elevate its privileges to an admin, right? That's a huge risk
Mhm.
because if a third party is compromised, the threat actor can become an admin on your environment, and there is a ransomware risk, or they can just turn off your entire production, right? Obviously, so that's a real threat, and that should go up. On the other hand, if you have a user and that user is protected with MFA managed in your protected identity provider and federates with an admin role, maybe that's okay. Maybe you just want that user to implement just-in-time access, meaning that they should not have a standing admin privileges, but they could get those privileges when and as required. So it's a different approach. So basically, we can offer our customers not only the visibility and the context, but also the ability to prioritize the risk and to remediate and address the risk in the right way. And we can differentiate between the right way to secure human identities, machine identities, and other risks that happen in the environment that might not necessarily be identity centric.
Yeah. So I've heard you say a couple times visibility and context, right? But switching gears a little bit, you call out the prioritization, and that prioritization gets you, eventually to that remediation. But how can security govern DevOps in a way that doesn't slow down any velocity or interrupt any existing workflows that are going on to run the business?
Absolutely. So let's first try to understand what do we mean by DevOps, right? Or what's the approach here, right? So historically, when you had a developer and that developer was building an application and they needed a server for their application, they would create a ticket for IT, right? And then the IT would create the server for them. Today, when people are utilizing AWS and modern public cloud infrastructure, developers don't need IT to provision servers. They just go and click a few buttons on the AWS console, and within seconds they have a server. Or they just write a code, CloudFormation, Terraform, that goes and provisions automatically a full
Mhm.
environment or servers and buckets and databases for them automatically. All that managed in code and being provisioned through a CI/CD cycle, right? So that's kind of the DevOps process. Then the developer also creates, a container, and they deploy the container on that server, right? So everything happens through the CI/CD pipelines, right? So first and foremost, um, security teams need to get visibility into those CI/CD pipelines and into the code that is used to provision the infrastructure, and also to deploy or to be deployed on that infrastructure going forward, right? So getting visibility into that is very important. Secondly, understanding what happens there and try to detect risks and vulnerabilities before they actually reach production, right? So one important way is to secure the runtime environment, but actually shifting those capabilities left towards the developers to the CI/CD pipelines or to the code repositories, detecting the misconfigurations and the problems there close to the developer actually can allow security teams reduce a lot of noise, because those problems will never reach production. They will basically, alert the developers that there are issues or actually failed builds, and then the developers can fix those problems before they hit the runtime environment. But ultimately, it's not only about alerting, right? No matter where you detect the problem, whether you detect the problem in the runtime environment or you detect that in the development cycle before it actually hits production, you have to have the developer remediate the problem. Most developers are not cloud experts. Most developers
Mhm.
are not security experts. They're not even measured on security. They're measured on how fast they deliver new features and build applications. That's our first and foremost priority. So you actually have to be very diligent in how you present that security information to them, right? You have to be able to present it clearly. You have to be able to explain why what you've identified is a real risk, why it's important than many other things. You have to open the right ticket to the right developer in the right dashboard. If they're using a platform like Jira, that's the way to go. If your organization is
Mhm.
utilizing ServiceNow, you have to go that way. Some developers are using instant messaging like Slack or Teams, right? So that's where you want to send them the finding. You want to open pull requests in their GitHub, right, directly to the developer who committed the misconfigured code, right? So you want to go directly to the source. And when you do that, you have to give them a solution, because they don't have the cycles to spend to understand the problem and find the solutions themselves, right? You really have to give that to them on a silver plate. And that's the way to drive return on investment in a security product like Tenable Cloud Security, because we're really helping security teams and we empower them to bridge that gap between the security organization and the developers by not only helping them, the security teams, identify the problems early, but also by helping them deliver these problems to the right developers in the right ways, explain the developers why the problems are important, and also giving them the solution that the developers can immediately act on and drive security and compliance of the environments. So I think the remediation and the right remediation and the right way to the right people is the way to go. And that's what really helps security teams secure the DevOps processes at hand.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for going through that. So, for anyone just joining us, we're here today with Tenable Cloud Security, and we're talking about identities and entitlements, and really how Tenable Cloud Security can bring that to the DevOps environment, meeting those developers where they are, and how they build, and making sure that the right identities have, the permissions that they need, but also the visibilities into the security and what's going on in real time, so that there is no waiting to remediate, that they're getting a plan where they are to keep going and keep the business moving. So, Arick, so tell us, you've got this Tenable Cloud Security, you've got it in front of DevOps, they're running, CI, CD, they're going through their processes. Really, how is this going to improve their security?
Absolutely. So first of all, with Tenable Cloud Security, both the security teams and the developer teams can get a comprehensive view of their cloud infrastructure security posture. Again, looking across the stack, looking at vulnerabilities on their workload, whether those virtual machines or containerized environments, Kubernetes clusters, what have you, serverless environments, etc. Looking at their network configurations, looking at their identities, looking at their data security posture management, and bringing all that story together, right? So in on-premise environments, we were used to, to siloed security approach. So you had networking security tools, you have the identity security tools, but in the cloud, all that information is accessible from the same APIs, right? And because of the shared responsibility model. So all that information can be drawn to one place, kind of analyzed together and prioritized together. So you can tell your security teams and your developers meaningful security stories. You're not just saying, hey, this specific workload has X, critical vulnerabilities, and you have to prioritize that. No, you can tell them, hey, this server that has those critical vulnerabilities is also exposed to the internet. So someone can potentially from the internet scan your server and actually exploit those vulnerabilities. So those vulnerabilities should have a higher risk rather than when they run on a server that is not exposed to the internet. Or maybe you have that server also using a service account in order to access some database, and that service account has sensitive permissions. So if that server is compromised, the threat actor can now use those sensitive permissions and entitlements to access sensitive data and exfiltrate that, or run a ransomware attack against your sensitive databases, right? So you're not looking at a security problem in a siloed approach, but you can actually tell meaningful stories about what we call toxic combinations or real life attack scenarios against your infrastructure. And by doing so, you can actually prioritize the right findings. Historically, if you look at the first generation of cloud security platforms, they were competing over who can identify more problems in an environment. But for a long time, that's not an issue anymore, because today, if we look at our customers, sometimes we find thousands or tens of thousands of findings, right? Some of those findings are, very tiny or insignificant, and they don't really pose risk or a compliance issue for the environment. So the name of the game stops being of who can find more issues, and it becomes who can find the right issues and who can surface the right issues, meaning prioritize those issues to the developers, to the security teams. And that's where we excel at Tenable Cloud Security, because we're able to draw all that rich context and help teams prioritize. The next story becomes how you can actually remediate that. So with Tenable Cloud Security, the remediation cycles are extremely effective. And that's what's driving the return on investment and the technology. And that's what's driving security, and that's what's driving compliance. Because, getting visibility and identifying risks, it's only one small part of the problem. You have to be able to solve the right risks, right? And you have to have developers in your organization solve those issues, hopefully automatically.
Yeah. It's a matter of bringing it all together, right? And bringing it all together, like you said, as it's happening. You don't want to let something small just kind of sit there, right? Because something small could eventually become something big. But at the same time, you don't want them focused in saying, oh, I found this one thing and now I'm done, right? You want it to be continuous.
Correct, absolutely. It's not a one-off exercise, right? Security is a lifestyle. you have to be, you have to be on top of that. You have to always have the right visibility, understand where the biggest risks now are. Especially, we all have to know, and remember that the cloud evolves. Cloud service providers like AWS, they release new services all the time. I think when we started the company 4 years ago, there were 200 services from AWS. I think now we're over 330 or 350 and counting. I lost track a long time ago. And all these services are amazing, right? So we're now in the world of Gen AI, and there are like a lot of Gen AI services, and etc. And customers start using those services, and they don't understand that when they use a service, immediately there are like 100 new identities and service accounts created in their environment. Some of them running with high privileges, some of them might be exposed, etc., right? So they have to understand all that, but they also should not be over scared, right? Because
Yep.
those things could be managed if you have the right visibility and you have the right processes and you have the right tool set, right? So you have to embrace cloud. You can go forward and do that securely by utilizing a platform like Tenable Cloud Security.
Yeah. And we know that's where customers are finding valuable information from Tenable Cloud Security. So tell us a little bit more about what Tenable is doing at reInvent coming up.
Absolutely. So we're going to have a huge presence there at reInvent. We invite you all to visit Tenable at AWS reInvent at our booth, number 167, November 27th to December 1st. We'll also be giving a lighting talk from humans to machines, mitigate risk for all identities in the cloud, specifically focused on some of the items we touched on today at our booth on Wednesday, November 29th at 12:30 p.m. And we also invite you all to learn more about Tenable Cloud Security by visiting hermetic.com website. It's very interesting. It has a lot of information about what people should be looking on when they want to secure their cloud infrastructure environments, and also help them understand what the biggest risks are and how they can actually remediate those risks by using our platform.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Arik. It's been a pleasure to sit here and talk with you today. I learned a lot, and I'm sure, the folks watching this are also hopefully learning. I hope that they're popping in the chat and telling us more, and that they will come and find you at reInvent and visit Tenable Cloud Security at hermetic.com.
Amazing, Jasmine. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to meeting you all at reInvent this year.
Awesome. Take care. Thanks.
Thank you.